Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of the No Rocket Ships podcast. My name is Jamie Hancock. This is a very exciting moment where we move from email into the real world of interviewing people who work in SaaS and technology and are generally interesting people to talk to. So we'll expand our brief over the next few weeks. This is the first ever episode. As I said, we are delighted to be partnering with our client Patchworks for these first episodes. They are an interesting, disruptive, not a rocket ship type of business, but they're creating a category, iPaaS. They're disrupting the integration market. They're trying to build a great business on stable foundations. So we've got a huge amount of time for them. Please engage with them directly after this, and let's get on with it. Our first episode follows this. Thank you. Welcome everybody to Welcome to No Rocket Ships, another one of my stupid names that appears to have taken a degree of life. This is the second actual recording. I don't know what order we'll put them out in, but I wanted to welcome my second victim, Dylan Valade. Thank you very much for coming, Dylan.
Jimmy, thank you. Thanks for having me. For those of you that don't know me, I've been working in big business digital transformation for about 15 years and been with the MACH Alliance for the last 4 years. And that's how I came across Jamie.
And Dylan's been with, when I met you, you were at PUMA. Puma. You say Puma, don't you?
PUMA, depends where you're at.
I'm going to say Puma because I'm talking to you. You were at Puma, and Puma had gone through the sort of traditional COVID explosion of money. Let's go and do digital properly, and you did that. I don't say rode that way, but you did that project, saw all sorts of things, and then you moved back. That was when you were based in Germany, and you moved back to the States to work at Abbott a couple of years ago now, I think. And you're
That's
now
right.
in Chicago having a nice time on the beach before you do something else. So I've caught you while you can say everything
Yes.
before you go and do something else.
Yeah, this is perfect timing. It can be very
Okay.
candid.
So I've got three questions. A bit like what I'm trying to do with these is trying to make them quick and snappy, and also ask all the questions that nobody will probably ever ask you. So number one is going to be, why are you still involved in Mac? Mac has been on this sort of journey of wave of popularity, unpopularity. Look, I'm involved, but you've been involved, right? You were initially, when I first met you, you were a very singularly independent thinker, and not on the bus wholeheartedly, as I would have called it. You weren't a disciple. You were very independent in the way that you thought. But you've become a little bit more involved as you've gone along. And so why are you still involved?
Good question. So, why am I involved with MACH after being kind of early and independent? That's right. I liked that it was the renegade group when I joined. That for me was kind of exciting. This was taking on the establishment. This is a new way to do enterprise software. And as we've kind of gone along, there are things I disagreed with from the beginning about MACH. Headless in particular is one that I don't really subscribe to in the architecture, but I don't think it's required for success. I think it's the last resort when you can't make everything else work the way you needed it to. In a way, now we've got ChatGPT or Perplexity, and that's basically your headless. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So what I really liked about being part of the alliance, though, was that it was the one group that I could go talk to and have the real conversation. Basically, anybody who's in that organization or near it is doing the same work. It's not that big of a group of us globally that does this work. So you can really have the honest conversation. Like, did this SI work for you? Does this software actually do what it says it does? How would you structure your deals? Like, there's a lot that you can get really quickly that the distance is so short. If I go to other big events, that's really tough. It's tough to find the right person. You get just abused by account managers. If I go to the mock events, that's not the case. I think you've been part of making that more comfortable for me as a brand person. And now the shift that's happening, I think, is more to my independent thinking. Now it's becoming more mainstream, which is that people are struggling to do this work. And the people that are receiving the software that they bought or these services, they're not successful, not easily. So you need a lot of psychological, kind of emotional support to make some of these things happen. And that part is also becoming part of what the mock group is building out. The training for this, in-person support to train on this, the certification that's required to say that someone actually knows what they're talking about when we're trying to tackle these types of big digital projects. It's just that I haven't found another group that does this any better. And I really like the human side that now the mock team is bringing.
That's very useful. I haven't heard anybody say that before, and that's very useful. I think you sort of read the sort of VTech storming off story and all the other stuff, but from somebody who's sort of inside the tent, if you like, who's not a disciple, I think that's a very interesting perspective, and I agree with it. Right, as you know, my view on community is that it's absolutely vital. Nobody's going to get any further unless, there's 50,000 vendors and the same number of customers there were 20 years ago. So how do you do that unless you've got some friends?
We do. And the organizations, the individuals doing a lot of this work and leading it don't have a lot of friends within their organization. So this is a peer group that they can really talk shop with and solve the problems that they need to go back to their team with answers for, because that's the reason they were put into these jobs, was to provide the answers, but a lot of it hasn't been solved yet.
That's interesting, isn't it? You talked to me about it before, the fact that, Mac internally in a big organization is not, oh, come and save us. Quite a lot of the time it's, screw you.
Yeah.
You were wrong. You were wrong. We said you were wrong. Oh, now we can prove you're wrong. It can be brutal, right?
Yeah, I see it's about an 18-month cycle for the first wave. And you either succeed in that or you don't as the leader in getting enough support. And then you get another year and a half attempt. So it just kind of continues, but that's about the length of these types of projects as well. So these engagements follow that kind of year and a half cycle. And either the vendors changed enough or the software roadmap's changed or the client has changed enough that it's no longer the same deal. So you're just continuing to reapply for your job and your whole team is as well.
So it's like getting elected to the Senate, as I talked about earlier this
It
week.
is.
As soon as you get elected to the Senate, you've got 2 years in the Senate, right? Is that right?
Yep, you
That's
do.
right. So as soon as you're elected, you're running again.
Hmm.
Right. Second question, and it kind of flows quite neatly on from the first, I suppose, is again, we've had lots of candid conversations about vendors, and people who know me know that I'm very passionate about the idea of about mis-selling. And this doesn't follow on from Mac specifically, but it follows on from your experience of internal politics and the sort of fanboy, fangirl culture around particular vendors and kind of mis-selling against roadmaps, etc., etc. I want to ask you, A, for a comment on all of it, and B, I suppose, talk to me about the damage that you think mis-selling or selling the roadmap that's never going to be delivered, for example, really, really does for people.
The overselling is internal and external, so it's happening on both sides. And when I look at some of the reasons that I wanted a say composable setup, it wasn't because I wanted more complexity to manage. It was because the roadmaps weren't being realized. So the vendors sold a multi-year deal that they actually can't deliver on. Maybe they were going to acquire some great team or software that they didn't get, but they didn't tell anybody that, or some other reason it fell apart. But no matter what, you get to the middle of the term of the contract and it's just not improving. It's not delivering. So now you still have sales targets you need to meet. You still got campaigns you've committed to. So you have to find a different way. That's where these kind of independent software vendors that were very agency kind of driven. They came from creative roots and startups, and they're fast and they do cool stuff. So then those get bolted in to fill the blank of a failed roadmap. Now you've got software that isn't really tested. It's not great, but it does work in isolation. You start putting it together with everything else, it starts to fall apart. And that's the easy pickings for a vendor or SI to come in and say, I can solve all of this for you. Let me wave the magic wand and all of these problems go away. But in reality, it's just more complexity. And it followed that 18-month cycle. The team that set it up's gone. So now the people that really know the insides are gone. Maybe they'll come back on a contract. Maybe they won't. But either way, you've given it to a new team. They come in like, oh, we'll use our accelerator. That doesn't really work out either. So you basically end up in a rebuild situation 2 or 3 years later. That's just the pattern. But when it comes to the missteps in the relationships, you've either done that holding hands with everybody or somebody's been lying. And it depends who that was, really. So if it's project manager or someone in that zone, that they're just eliminated. But if it's somebody top and you got top to tops and they're either both confused or somebody's really misrepresenting what's being done, then the relationship of the entire team under them starts to falter and the confidence in that group is lost. So it's either the client's a horrible client to work with, we never want to work with them again, we tell everybody else stay away, or it's the other side. Tell all my friends don't buy this team, they're horrible, they treated us like crap, they didn't do their work. But again, back to this being a really small community, you almost can't afford to burn any bridges because there's only a few options. So that's then now that you start burning them down, you end up being relegated to the people that maybe aren't as skilled in this or as experienced. And
That was
that's
interesting.
then what comes back around. So now you end up with someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about. They know your organization, you trust them, but they don't understand how to make these things work together. And they don't have the relationships with the other vendors that need to be required for this constellation to be successful.
It was interesting. I spoke to my first of these conversations for rocket ships was with Jim Herbert, and I asked him the same question actually because he has missold, right? He's been one of the people who's missold in the past, as he will, probably hang his head in shame, but he will. He's also sponsoring this podcast, by the way. But what's really interesting about that is that he said the people that really have lied in the vendor landscape and agency landscape, 2 or 3 times in, they can't get hired. So it does come out. I'm sort of pleased that happens, right? Because I think it's just complicated enough now. I mean, the obvious example of what you alluded to a minute ago was the promotions engines. The Talon Ones and the Voucherifies. That is a classic case of Salesforce or whatever wasn't doing that stuff. Has probably said they would do it, never did it. These two platforms arrived. Actually, I've never heard anybody criticize either of them. They obviously do what they were supposed to do. Thank you very much. Maybe they've got a lot better over time. Maybe one's got better more quickly than the other one, but they're now mainstream because they fixed a problem that nobody else was going to fix.
They did. And then the criticism of them is that they're giving money away. They're giving your money away every time you use a voucher or discount and coupon code. And that's the other rub for this type of technology. It encourages marketing and commercial merchandising teams to give their product away rather than find a way through their technology group because they're so difficult sometimes to work with that they end up working around them as opposed to changing the core product, the way they sell, the way they interact. They can't do it fast enough. So then they end up merchandising in a way that's not as profitable.
And I hear that all the time, right? Talking to you and obviously I run a Commerce Futures community group, which you're part of, 200 odd people talking about vendors most of the time. What's interesting about that group is that people have very short memories about what's good and what's not, and the perspectives are never the same on a particular vendor, even 3 or 4 months aside. But you quite often hear the technology voice talking about, well, they should have asked us, talk to us first, and then the business voice going, yeah, but you wouldn't have let me, so I just did it anyway.
Yep.
Kind of. And I don't think that's going to stop. I think, and in a way, that's one of the beauties of the cowboy nature of ecom is that you've got non-expert buyers buying software from non-expert sellers. So it's just a bit Wild West, isn't it?
Kind of fun, yeah.
So speaking of which, the Wild West has just got bigger overnight, hasn't it? AI is
It really did.
Everybody's terrified. Today is the day that apparently GPT have announced, or not announced, but they let the Financial Times know that they were going to produce a checkout. So now everybody's gone absolutely off the cliff about that. Rightly so. I wonder if you think, talk to us about AI implementation, and talk to us about it specifically around marketing technology. I know that that's an area you're sort of passionate about. I'm not going to ask you who's going to win and lose, because that's not fair. I'm going to ask you how people should be thinking about, I'm going to AI that, or I'm not going to AI that. How should people be thinking about that? Because I know that's something, when you were at your Abbott time, you spent a lot of time doing that for large numbers of internal clients.
What to AI, what not to AI. Uh, the takeoff of, I would say, useful AI use cases is low. There just haven't been many successes yet. The work that we've been doing before, machine learning for um, all of your product master data, filling in gaps, the merchandising, understanding what are the cohorts, what are the categories that consumers are asking for, but we're not actually presenting on our websites or marketplaces. All of that's really useful, and we've had it for years. This next step into the LLMs, and now a lot of the grammar fixing, a lot of copywriting, the image generation, useful, but like it's still uncanny valley with the pictures of people, and people are what sell. So you still can't really produce great fake humans. That'll come. And then I think for advertising, this will be way more valuable. For the moment, the types of companies that need to generate images that don't have people in them, they're able to maybe save time on production creative. Concepting, prototyping, that's where I think in our current cycle, we could save a lot in that time. The first 8 weeks of any creative engagement, the briefing, like those types of pieces, we can do that. And we can get a live demo of something up quickly. So get that into your hands, let somebody test it, play with it. All of those pieces are really worth it right now. When I look at what we're going to need next, it's kind of when PIM systems, the product information management, really came on the market. We spent a lot of time figuring out how to feed all of our product data into one database, and then how to start distributing it to marketplaces and our own channels.
And all your rubbish data, right? That's the thing, right? All of the data then was rubbish, and PIM projects failed because the data was rubbish. Now
Exactly.
the data is enriched, etc., etc. They stand a lot more chance of being. AI fixes that problem, doesn't it?
It could, or it could do it wrong, and now you got higher returns because the measurement's wrong. So but that's where I would be putting my time and the effort is in establishing processes. What I keep saying is you can't automate what you don't know how to do yet. So if you don't already have a process, there's nothing to automate. First, you need to establish one, and then you can start to automate parts of it that make sense. And maybe not all of it does, but the getting your company's organization into some sort of structured data format is what I would advocate for. And this is where the modern content management systems could be really successful in establishing an organizational wide data model, not just the way we not just the way we would do blog posts and articles and product detail pages, but like the whole organization, including all of its relationships outside of its organization. How do they all fit together? Now you've got something to feed these big AI engines that would help them have context. They'll be able to figure out, how does this fit? And then they can map it to the audiences where it's going to need to go, to the responses that people, where they can't find an answer. You'll be able to start providing it. Establishing yourself as the authority is really the objective, I think, over the next couple of years. You want to be the authority in your area, and there isn't yet a standard for identifying that you're the canonical source for this information. That's going to take direct relationships with the big organizations to the big AI players. Say, here's how we want you to present us. This is what good looks like. And then that's something people can link back to find out.
And that's where these standards, not standards, but standards like A2A, etc. That's why these protocols that are being advocated by and sort of pushed by AWS, Google, etc., are likely to become standards that people start to follow in designing agentic systems and kind of linking to LLMs.
think so. I would imagine like the Open Graph when that came out, kind of for social sharing and some other things. So you had consistency in your HTML that everyone knew what this was supposed to be about. We need something similar for AI. And I do have a concern about the MCP servers, these servers AI to AI being the same nest that we opened with microservices, which was the other part of the mock architecture that I'm not totally endorsing. And now we're going to have a many to many type relationship again, where we never quite got stable on the first breaking down of our applications into smaller elements. Now we're going to make it even more, I guess, distributed and complicated. Think that's something that one that AI can help solve, but only with really good documentation. And so then you're going to get back to really good engineering. So I think the companies that have the strongest engineering and data discipline are going to be the type that win in this next cycle or two.
And equally, the two big sort of out there, the subjects that nobody wants to. So integration is always still that subject that people talk about but don't talk about properly. And people think that an API, yeah, fine, it's done. That's that's a bit that could easily become a potential horror show. And then people seem to, every time I talk to people about testing, they go, "Oh yeah, testing. That's all. That's easy now because we're just going to get somebody. We'll just get a machine to do it." Whoa! If you're going to release faster, you're going to do more. You've got to have to your point, you've got to have a much better process to do that with. That's about process, not code.
Process and rapid deployment so that when you have something ready to get into production, that it's there in minutes or seconds or milliseconds if you can do it. But if you've got a long process to get anything live, hours, days, weeks, months, you're really, really going to struggle to fix something once it's gone sideways. So that we go back to the promotion system. Let's say you put the wrong product information out there, the wrong price out there. How long does it take to correct it? And the more the testing is misunderstood or automated, the less a human's going to be in there checking. The last thing you want is to show up a month later or a quarter later, find out you've totally blown your merchandising and you had no idea. That's the type of work that I think will start to shift some of our e-commerce digital tech teams away from a bit of just keep doing implementations to learning more about how their business actually runs. And then what to AI, what not to AI should become a bit simpler. Okay, this is what drives our business. This is where people find value in our product. Let's try to focus on that, which may not be add a new partner, add a new vendor. It might actually be eject a bunch of this stuff, maybe get closer to the monolith structure so that it's simpler for us. And now that a lot of things have stabilized, I think you're going to see more of that. So then if ChatGPT became your sales channel, like it's kind of like selling on TikTok or Instagram a little while ago, you don't have to worry about running everything else. You don't need A/B testing software. You don't need all of this browser testing. Like, not your job. Your job is to fill it with content and context and make sure the price is right.
You can see why people are terrified, but in many ways, life could get quite a lot simpler for a lot of people.
It might.
You don't need 40 if you're just selling through an LLM. You don't need 40 things in your e-com stack.
No, new
But there's a
people
whole
on
load of
your
jobs
team.
aligned. But there's a whole load of jobs aligned to those 40 things, right? So people might be really reluctant to throw it away, even if they should throw it away.
If you really use your product, you'll know what it needs next. And a lot of us are working on things that we don't use. And I say there's one thing that's difficult for me with some of the health products. I don't have the conditions that need these therapies. I couldn't put myself directly in the shoes of the person that's dealing with it, with all of that. And so there's design thinking, there's ways to get yourself into those shoes, but imagine if you live it, how much easier it would be to do it. And then so that if I could get a lot of these software vendors out of selling their roadmaps to me and into using their own product, I think we'd get a little bit further faster. And that's that's what I would like accelerators to turn into, or they actually have to incubate the business for me a little bit and run it on the piano.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, it makes me think of I did a sales consultancy job once for a craniofacial biopharma business that was selling resorbable plates and screws that dissolved in water for and I ended up in the first thing I did when I won the contract as a salesman, and then my boss said, you go and deliver it because it was a sales consulting project. I ended up in a theatre, operating theatre in Detroit, watching people do the operation, watching patients have this stuff fit, kind of put in there. Nothing brings you to your, it grounds you more than watching it being done to somebody. How important it is. It's fascinating. Anyway, right. Punchy, short, done, pithy, all that stuff. You're the dream.
Are we good?
We're good, Dylan. Thank you so much for being
You're very welcome.
my second guy. And look, look forward to many more years of working with you in various guises in various places. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. You too. All right.
Thanks. Let me
Bye.
stop.